Namaste and good evening, everyone. I, Ritika Gupta, Assistant Director at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, Prabhav Evam Niti Anusandhan Sansthan, Nai Delhi, extend my heartiest welcome to you all to IMPRI #Web Policy Talk. Today we are here for a special talk on housing in India, what happens next, as part of the series #Local Governance with Tikender Singh Panwar, organized by Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI. The speaker for today is Mr. Romi Khosla. It is my delight to introduce to you, sir. Sir is an Indian architect and urban planner who received his bachelor's in economics from University of Cambridge and qualified as an architect at the Architectural Association London. Sir has founded Group for Rural and Urban Planning in Delhi in 1974. Currently, he leads the Romi Khosla Design Studio and have designed numerous large institutional complexes as well as small community-based rural projects. Amongst his varied projects are the 600-acre SEZ for Sajlon in Udupi, National Gallery of Modern Arts in Bombay, School for Spastic Children in New Delhi, Corporate Office of United Breweries in Bangalore, and 200-acre campus of the Assam Valley School, as well as number of recreational buildings, including luxury Meridian Golf Resort and Spa in Kathmandu. His latest work includes Volvo headquarters in Gurgaon, Indian Embassy in Uzbekistan, and APJ Corporate Office in Kolkata. Thank you, sir, for joining us today. I would now like to request our moderator, Mr. Tikender Singh Panwar, who was former Deputy Mayor of Shimla and visiting fellow at IMPRI, to take the proceeding forwards. Sir, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's indeed a privilege to be here on the Impact and Policy Research Institute. And this is a new series that we are building up, a series called #Local Governance. And actually, there's no better than Romi Saab. And Romi Saab, please allow me to call you just Romi, also because of the fact, that the two of us inherit some geographical inheritance. Yeah. So, because Romi's childhood has been in Shimla, the town where I have served for 5 years as deputy mayor. And just to put it in a lighter mode, I think Romi is more Himachali than me because he has presence in different parts of Himachal. I have presence in only 2 places. So yeah, so welcome Romi to this series. I mean, I'm so happy to start this series with you. And as I was pointing out, I mean, it's a privilege to have Romi because this local governance is quite not just ideologically quite linked to what Romi has been advocating, building, and also the kind of alternatives that we have to seek in this new world, the new world which is based on humongous amount of extraction of capital that we are witnessing, humongous amount of inequity that gets further spread. And there's something very interesting that Romi is going to build is the kind of partition. I mean, the kind of division that we are witnessing in our society. And what better to talk about housing? I mean, something which Romi has done all through his life, from constructing, from building houses, from building alternatives. So yeah, I think it's really indeed a proud privilege. But I think before I ask Romi to really go ahead and make his presentation, it is also interesting and important for our participants, for our viewers to know that how all this actually emerged. This emerged from a very funny and interesting order from the government of India, which said, look, and there were, by the way, multiple orders that came during the pandemic. So one of the orders said, look, if you must ensure a distance of 10 square meters. I mean, from 2 gaz ki duri to 10 meter ki duri. And then you have to ventilate your houses. And then you have to put exhaust fans in your houses. Then you have to use your air conditions by ensuring that your doors and windows remain open. I mean, what the hell this government was talking about, not realizing that, 75% of the people live in just 2-room houses with not, I mean, with a floor area of not more than, I guess, 40 square meter, and then you're asking 30 square meter distance. So I think, and Romi had very interesting ideas to explain that actually what is it that is happening, and what is the alternative. So I think it will be a very interesting presentation. Of course, I have my questions, which I will ask later on. But at the same time, I think, Arjun, if just correct me if I'm wrong, we're also going live on Facebook and also on YouTube. So probably we can share both the links here, so that anyone who wants to pose a question can directly put it there on the Facebook, which will get further generated to us, and we can further market to Romi to address those questions.
Right. I'm also sharing and to you and Romi, sir, so that you can share.
Sorry?
Thank you.
I'm also sharing with you over WhatsApp so that you can.
Thanks. Great. So over to you, Romi Sahab, and it's indeed a privilege for us to have you as the initiator of this new dialogue that we're building, dialogue for local. Yeah, thanks. Local dialogue. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this wonderful introduction and for the opportunity you have given me to share some of my thinking with you. I think naturally you will ask, you did ask, why have I used the word next? And we have the first slide. Why next? And it is next because something has happened. In the last 3 years, something has happened, and India will never be the same again after this 3-year period, which I'm suggesting is between 2020 and 2022. Last time something so awful happened to us was in 1947, 75 years ago it will be, the first partition of India. It changed India forever. Now it will be 2022 next year, and once more we are forcing our second partition on us, which will change India, which has changed India forever. Can I go to the next slide, please? What did 47 do? It divided India. What are we experiencing today? India being divided. You know, when our grandchildren read their history, they will know how we divided ourselves twice in 75 years. First, in 1947, we divided our land and our communities. The second time was in 2022, and we divided our entire society up and down the country by partitioning not our land, but our identity. Along some religious, ethnic, caste aspects. Now, once our grandchildren will see how both these partitions caused, as they read the history, what was common between both these partitions. Millions of people lost their lives. And which is why I call this the second partition. Let me just give you a few images to remind you of our division in 1947. The next slide, please. Entire families were destroyed. And when I'm speaking like this, I'd like you to bear in mind what is happening today. Next one, please. There was a mad rush to leave and go the other side of the border, to leave the towns and go back to the villages. Next one, please. And there were scenes which we see today, unpleasant, so let me change that. Now, what we are discussing today has a certain background and a personal meaning for me through my experiences. Thinking and discussing the meaning of partition has been very important for our family. We think about it all the time because we worry about the future of this country. Our relationship with the first partition began in 1947 when both Nehru and Patel had asked my father to hold an inquiry into the riots of 47. His findings were then published, and here is a page from it. On the other side, my family, some 25 years later, my father-in-law, Bhisham Sani, wrote his monumental Thamas. Next slide, please. Which came from his personal and painful experiences of partition. What it meant to partition a country is deeply understood by us in our family. And we see it happening again. Apart from our own partition in our country, I personally had experiences of other partitions also. I was strongly influenced by them during my work in countries in conflict. I was working when Cyprus was split up with the UN team. I was working when Kosovo was formed with the UN team. So in our family, we know that the future of our country can only be threatened by another partition. You will ask, is there no hope? Have we become a melon that you can just cut into slices? Next slide. No. The only way to reunite India now is to have a national program for universal social security. And I will come to housing because housing is the critical component of this. If we learn from history and act, there's a lot of hope. We are at a point when we have no choice. Only one thing can reunite us as a nation is to have a wide net in which every family is included and is provided with universal social security, which guarantees shelter, health, education, and employment. And if you put this on the ground, it means is given a house, is given schools, is given hospitals and jobs. And they have to come together. They are interlinked, interconnected, and this is the only safety belt we have left after this second partition of ours. We need to restore faith in government. Government provides universal social security. That is how we will restore our faith in government. We will become whole again. Otherwise, we face a very dark future. Next slide, please. Now, what I've noticed is that in the history of the world, particularly in our country also, mass murders cause irreversible changes in any country. For India, both partitions changed us because millions of people died. Every family lost somebody. In Europe, the World War, Second World War, First World War, similarly profoundly affected those countries, which changed permanently. Every family in those countries lost people in the war. We got our independence in 1947 after 250 million people were killed in the war. And so many Indians amongst us. So there was global disaster, and the British could no longer contain our country's struggles and had to give us independence. And so similarly, we find in 2022, in this second period of partition, millions of people will have been killed. So globally, and because our pandemic could not be managed in India. So it is with this background that I come. I'd like you to place the importance of housing in this background. That this is our setting today. We need housing because we need to put this country together again. And this is the subject of my discussion with you. We have to build a new country. And housing is one of the 4 pillars on which this new country will stand. The other pillars being health, education, and employment. So let us talk about housing. What is the context of housing? What 2022 will have done when it comes, it will have increased the level of our suffering enormously. You see, we have had a series of governments which have used poverty statistics, have used poverty to derive their programs. How many times, Tikender, have you heard the election cries which say, we promise to remove poverty, but first let us come to power and then we will destroy the enemies of poverty. This is the substance of every election which we have been holding. We are meanwhile still waiting news that Vijay Mallya, Betul Choksi, Nirav Modi, etc., when are they going to come back? We need the money. Or do we continue making pavilions, unity statues, bullet trains, Central Vista? I mean, something has taken a shift towards the darker side. Why are we continuing to breathe the smell of secrecy and blood? Is this what we need to build our country? Housing is at the core of every family that suffers in India. A house provides every family with shelter for living and dignity. It provides an address, a dignity for that family. You know, it's not poverty only that counts. It's the love people receive and the dignity with which they live. It's their ability to dream about a future. That is what housing does. Unfortunately, a majority of our houses are bad, broken, temporary, overcrowded, unhygienic, without water and electricity and toilets. That's the majority of the houses. In this situation, how can you rebuild a nation? How can you rebuild your communities? In the last census, we found 70% of the houses came in this category of being single-roomed or two-roomed, in which families of 6 and 7 were living. And we are expected to join the global community by telling fairy stories about us being strong and united when we are actually getting fragmented every day. This is how I am coming to understand our times. And so where do we begin? How can we reverse this trend? And let's begin by changing our awareness about all the families who suffer. We have neglected our people and their condition for over 70 years. And we have not planned our future as a nation. Instead, we are just pretending to be a great nation simply because we have a very large landmass and we have a very large population. So next slide, please. My first suggestion is that to change our understanding and realize that we as a nation cannot move forward without universal housing, health, education, employment. Many of your viewers will be aware that Bhutan has pioneered an index which has become global now called the Happiness Index. This is an extraordinary in our world full of poverty and wealth measurement, because we are sitting up pretending to help the poor by measuring GDP, Human Development Index, Millennium Development Goal Index, Inflation Index, National Income Index, Millennium Development Goals also. All of them are important. They're important, okay, they frame the policies for governments, but none of them go to the heart of the matter, the reason why families are suffering. So the first creative step that our policymakers, Planning Commission, Niti Aayog, United Nations, whoever it be, we will focus on our human problem first, not on their economic problem. we will not focus on economic growth. And this can be done by creating a human suffering index. If Bhutan can measure happiness, then India needs to measure families and suffering. From the results of this survey, we will understand the prime importance of housing and what a terrible condition our housing situation is. Now, the second measure that we need to take, have the next slide, please, is to, once you become aware of the level of suffering through a survey, new initiatives can be taken by launching a massive new initiative to decentralize governance. You cannot rule this country from the center if you want to remove suffering. Suffering is experienced by every family in a different way. So the one and only way to do this, we already have the provisions which were passed in 1992, except nobody is interested in implementing them. So we must decentralize governance and relocate the responsibilities for providing housing facilities through local governance by devolving the responsibilities of housing to panchayats and to blocks and municipalities. The third step will be for each local body to prepare a report card on the status of each family living within the jurisdiction through documenting the quality of their housing of each family. You can rebuild, it's not, I won't say you can, you have to rebuild this country from each family upwards, not from the center downwards. The responsibility has to be decentralized and move away. See, the central diktats, fund allotments, programs, projects, they've become dysfunctional. Once the panchayat or the local government unit has prepared a record, the jurisdiction of the condition of the families in this area, we can begin to start repairing the damage and attend to each family. We need the medical facilities. Of course, I have not gone into the other three pillars. I've only concentrated on housing. So there is a need for not only for new houses, but also for additions to houses. These are both important aspects for the local municipalities to take into consideration. Now, each typical house has 5 components in it. When I get down to the nitty-gritty of the method by which we will be able to engage with the local authorities, I will give a principle that each house has got 3 parts or 5 parts. It has a structure, which makes it stable. It has a roof, which protects it from rain. It has walls, which protect it from temperature, flooring, and 5th, openings, doors and windows. So what I am proposing here is for the need to take the first component, which is structure, the structural stability of the house, out of the equation of the local panchayat, local municipal body, block development body. The roof, walls, floors, openings can all be done with local materials using the skills of the craftsman so that we generate an employment program. So this is a major source and an economic multiplier. The construction of the safe load-bearing structure or skeleton structure can avoid reinforced concrete, right? Everybody thinks reinforced concrete is a wonderful solution, but the fact remains that concrete is a very scientifically precise material, and there's no way you can control it in far and distant parts. So what I'm proposing is that we will mass produce bolted standard steel frame systems which get covered by locally made walls and roofs. We have the next slide, please. I would like to show you an example of one of these. To tackle quickly the immense scale of the housing shortage, standard steel bolted members can be made available for the entire country to construct new structures or extensions regardless of the region. You see, when the region craftsmen and building materials cover the structure, which is now safe, you've got a roof on it, then you will find that there will be an enormous interaction between the community and the house and the building, and the tremendous variety and diversity will come out, which is part of our architectural heritage for each region. So I'm not going to go into details of this because you need to prepare lists of materials and you need to make the panchayat and the municipal authorities, whoever local governance unit you're using, to be part of it. Access to funding mechanisms, again, are simple. Mass-produced steel housing is given as part of the universal social security by the government. It represents about 25 to 30% of the cost of the house. The rest is worked out between local government level funding, mortgaging, loans, etc., with the beneficiaries. Because the size of the problem is so enormous, one can hardly say that you're going to give away this housing. Once the skeleton steel mechanism has been erected at the site on a safe structure, then the other components, the walls, the windows, the plastering, the floors, etc., can be made as per the requirement of the beneficiary. Now, how do we deliver this? And here I have proposed before that this large-scale program of housing to be done quickly requires a new kind of volunteer service to be set up. And we are proposing here that architects, civil engineers, mechanical engineers who graduate have to join a service, a housing security service, for 2 years, and to work to implement this, help implement this project with the local authorities as a prerequisite to them qualifying from their degrees. Now, similar service would have to be done for doctors, etc., but I'm not going to go into that. So let me conclude this by emphasizing we are in an emergency. And in emergency, we need to provide pre-engineered housing frames delivered to every far corner of this country. We need to have homes to each one of our families. My estimate is that out of the 30 crore families in India, urgent housing support is needed for 2 crore families. You see, as a country, as a government, we have to face the vast numbers of our social bankruptcy. You know, you've heard when people are quantifying vaccine doses, the number is in millions. It is in crores. And this is only for one particular treatment. We have to face that 4 crore people require basic education. Everything is in crores and millions. We have to face this and reunite this country by getting in touch with our families. Thank you, Tikender. I'll leave it at that. I know you'll have questions, but there it is.
Thank you so much for making this wonderful presentation, Romi. So Arjun, before I can just see, before I ask okay, so before I ask an anonymous attendee question to be read, I think the 2 questions that I want to raise or make a point here, Romi. The first one is, and I have no problems actually with what you've suggested. In fact, I fully endorse that decentralized governance is the key, and even housing should be handed over. So, but tell me, I mean, when we say relocate providing housing to the panchayats, I mean, so so what you're also trying to do is contradict the whole Nehruvian, model of when we ask Corbusier to build Chandigarh. I mean, so there was a completely different context in which housing was desired when we started building this nation. So, what is this landmark difference that we are finding now? Can't those, those same models of building houses be again revisited, or why you're still focusing on this decentralized? That's the first thing. Second thing is, I mean, which is linked to the first question, is that what you have suggested is that as far as our master plans are concerned in the towns, and in Himachal and various parts of the country, we have those town and country planning departments also. So they hardly plan the country at all. I mean, there's no plan. So what they've been focusing only on land use. So okay, this is the FAR, etc., etc. But what you are suggesting right now is also to design the house, at least the structure, and maybe then build in that component of local masonry or local architecture. But don't you think the postmodernists would say, hey, it's a complete totalitarian style? I mean, I don't want to shape the house like this. So why should I be forced to do it like that? Or is it just for the urgent based housing that you're suggesting such a thing? And from this, the third one, which is also important, is how do you look at housing such a local design, local need actually structure in which we have to reimagine. For example, I know you've done lots of work in Ladakh, and I'm also now interested to do something in Leh. And one of the funniest things that we witnessed in Leh is that the Chandigarh model design is actually copied and translated into Leh, where we have a minus 30 degrees centigrade temperature during the winters, and then we saw chill planes for, children, of course. So don't you think that complete paradigm shift, and there's something that is happening? So all that is happening, how we structure in the mainstream, and that's how I think that is what really.
Well,
and if you allow me to read all those questions and then take over.
No, I'll not be able to. Let's deal with them because they may deal. Let's go first to your first question, which regards the setting up of ideal cities like Chandigarh, etc. Now, what we have to remember is that the Nehruvian model was based on a mistaken notion that we were going to industrialize. And you remember the big steel plants and remember the big dams. So there was a great mood, which economists at the time believed that society progresses from agriculture to industry. Because in Europe, the farmers had been driven off the land to enter the factories, it was thought that this is the correct way to develop. In fact, when you look at us today in 2020, we have deindustrialized. 95% of our labor force is self-employed. Where is this industrialization? Who is supposed to go and live in these cities, which are full of government? So some serious questions about the nature of our urbanization have come out. I'm not going to enter into a larger discussion on this, but all I can say is the ideals that we had for our development and future during the period of Nehru have changed now. We have understood our country much better. We have realized that we have not carried the burden of the poor. We imagined the magic of industrialization would suck all the poverty out and make everybody wealthy. In fact, none of that has happened. What we have experienced is that many industrialists have siphoned off large amounts of surpluses from this country. So we have to re-examine that model. Now I come to the issue of the architecture. Now I wanted to emphasize, when you say you're right, people will say that, are you giving a standard house? But I can assure you that when I put up a precast steel column, nutted and bolted and secure, you are not going to see it. If you remember that last slide of mine, you can't, except for the veranda, you don't see the steel structure in it at all. And yet it is stable. From my personal experience, I have found that you can erect a frame and put a roof on it. Then the family will put that house together in much shorter time than you think. Because what defeats them is the structure.
Yeah.
Once I give them a roof, it's done. So I'm sorry, there was the third question that you asked.
Well, the whole notion of land use change.
Yes, the master planning and land use. See, what happens is that master planning is a master plan is a place where builders go and plunder. Builders sit in the master plan office and change land use. So master planning, which is never done, not done abroad at all, people do land use planning, which is very different. What happens in master plans is that you start interfering with local communities by advocating their Chandigarh ideals on them. Now, those Chandigarh ideals have died. You don't have places to work, to go to work, places to go to live, places to go to shop. We are an integrated society. We work, we shop, we live together. We have to understand the Indian reality and plan by local neighborhoods. Every local neighborhood has to take the responsibility for planning its own neighborhood, which is within its jurisdiction. Whether houses are allowed up, high, low, it's up to them. You cannot have, you see, since 1961, for instance, Delhi has had a master plan. Oh, have we succeeded? Have we achieved anything?
Well,
right?
We know, how it's been downplayed, or
Every 10 years, some new city like Rohini comes up. Is this part of the master plan? No, this is land speculation. So as long as builders are closely associated with the planning authorities, we will never get livable cities. We will get profitable cities, but not livable cities.
Yeah. And this example that I cited from Leh and Chandigarh, how they just,
What has happened is that there is a temptation that I'm a Ladakhi. I find out that there is a grant going, a donation going. I can have a program support, provided I'm able to submit drawings, engineering approvals, everything else. So there's nobody in Ladakh doing this, right? So I get ready-made solutions from Chandigarh and include it into my application. And that is what determines the kind of building that comes up. You see, in Leh, we can just discuss this for a minute. Leh has a very strong and very viable, environmentally sound construction technology. For some reason, concrete slabs and concrete columns have become a matter of prestige, right? A matter of prestige, like a scooter becomes owning a scooter becomes prestige. Owning a car becomes a matter of prestige. So what happens is concrete houses are a signal that, oh, the owner has gone out and he's succeeded outside and he's bringing something great from outside inside. But again, because local communities are not in control of their environment and of their building, this misuse takes place and we get into disasters.
Great. So I think I'll read the questions. Arjun, you want me to read the questions, or how do you? Are you there? I think let me do that. So first we have from an anonymous attendee, and the question is, what are your views on GHTC challenge India launched this year, where they are using new technology for sustainable housing in India? They are building 1,000 houses in 6 selected cities each. Now, Romi, do you want me to read all the questions? There are 3 or 4.
No, because we won't be able to retain them. But what I can do is very quickly answer it.
Yes.
The problem of housing is so large that whatever effort is being made has meaning to it. I would not say to anybody that this has a bad program or a good program. I would only ask the people who dwell in it. Now we know, for instance, that Dharavi also had similar program, but I went to Dharavi, I went and met the families, and I observed some were happy, some were not happy. But housing was given, dignity was given. So I have no criticism for any housing project that goes ahead.
Mhm. So we have another whose name is Penelope Hill. Hi, this is Penelope Hill, anonymous attendee question. The first one: what is the increasing climate threat? With the increasing climate threat, it is also important to have eco-friendly structures. In your experience, can you share any case study or developing nation like India who have implemented too eco-friendly housing? And there's another one from Penelope Hill only. Whether while designing city structures, I think we'll take the next one once you answer this one, Romi.
Okay.
Because,
You
yeah.
see, when we can come with a category called environmental friendly, there are some set norms, which like for instance, the Green Council does. The Green Council is a global council which has it has a checklist in which there are 20, 30 points. And if your structure answers those points, in other words, are you recycling water? Are you using local materials? How far is the furthest distance to the material that you brought to your house? When all these answers are made, it's like a mark sheet. So depending on how you score will give you an idea of how environmentally suitable your house is. We have to start with that. We have to provide guidelines, because what happens is these guidelines have been formed in the West. So the kind of catchment areas that they have drawn up are very strict, in the sense that these are well-developed societies. So I can go 2 miles down the road and get all my building material, but when I'm in Ladakh, I may have to travel 50 miles. So that would then not qualify according to these standards. Therefore, each district must make its own guidelines for the scorecards on which they will become environmentally acceptable housing.
But the point is, who would accept that scorecard? I remember, Romi, because I just recently visited Leh, and that's where another question also comes from one of our Ladakhi friends. And, you know, one of the very famous names in Leh, so who's into this alternative designing and alternative housing, he is after the government to get his, housing model accepted by the norms. So the norms are so jargonized and the jargon is so huge that this poor chap who has a big international name and fame is unable to get through that excess. And of course, he also is inclined to get a big market because he wants to sell those houses then to army and all whatever. Even if someone has a business in,
you see, there are the International Green Council, which has got extensive offices in India, is one of the best places you refer this problem to. You need experts to do it.
Hi, do you mean we in Ladakh should go for traditional way of construction, like the Leh Palace, I think Leh Palace, instead of cement and metal steel structure? So this is Fonsuk from Ladakh.
You see, I would not like to advocate this or that for this. You have to see your financial situations. All I would say is, please make sure that your house that you build is energy efficient, keeps the cold out without having to resort to electricity or as little electricity as possible. The one and only problem in Leh is very low temperatures. It's not a rainfall problem. It's very low temperatures and high consumption of electricity, because let's not forget, electricity gets generated there by diesel. So diesel is brought in from Srinagar in trucks. So the whole sequence of power generation needs to be looked at, and we certainly should minimize the use of electricity in creating environments in our houses. If the palace does it very well, then so be it.
Okay. Okay, great. So we have again,
Tikender, sir, if you are able to hear me.
Romi,
Yes,
please go.
I'm able to hear
Arjun, yeah, please.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes, sorry, the connection is weak. Yes, Ritika.
Romi, Arjun, go ahead. You want to say something?
Yes, I just wanted to ask some of the questions and policy related, scheme related question to Romi sir. So
Okay.
the earlier we had Rajiv Awas Yojana, Indra Awas Yojana during the UPA time. 12th five-year plan also had a lot of focus on housing, habitat. There was Rajiv Rin Yojana, Indra Awas Yojana. It was continued to, I'll say 2017-18. Even all the villages, rural people know. Then we had something called Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, housing for all by 2022. And the urban component, as you mentioned, the 2 crore shortage. The 2 crore shortage was really envisaged for the urban areas. And that was the numbers which Professor Kundu, that technical committee has, and I have also worked very closely with it. So the numbers was 1.8 crore, the shortage. And the ministry also then suggested that, okay, 2 crore is the shortage. And then the revised as per the demand survey, the numbers came down to 1.1 crore. And almost all of them are sanctioned now. And we have been highlighting that there is the problem of redevelopment of slums, also rental housing, migrant worker housing. When we talk about the rural housing scenario, the estimated shortage was around 3 crores. I had a paper in EPW where I'm arguing that the shortage is to the tune of 5 crore, 6 crore. So there also there has been a lot of movement. Almost around more than around 3 crore houses has been sanctioned, and that has happened in the time of last 7 years. Adding to that, there has been GSTC, Global Housing Technology component, which has kicked in on 1st January. Prime Minister launched that many countries are coming here and giving their model, having all this incorporation of energy efficiency, design, and everything. So how do you see the scheme, especially for social housing, is going forward? RERA for the market-oriented economy or the housing as we see, RERA has come in. Now it is going to be the 4th year. How do you see RERA? Does it have any lever or any control? As Tikender sir was also saying, that who is going to look into all those things if we have this standardization and everything? So how do you see the state of affair of housing from also the bureaucratic point of view? Because bureaucracy, if you see any state, the bureaucrats really want to make some money. As you said, the builders also want to make, this is going for profit, but the ease of doing business or ease of building or having that compliance is really not going forward. Swachh Bharat Mission also had the many of the things that you have to install this, rainwater harvesting, and there is so much of things. So how do you see, Romi sir? And most of the compliances are also city and state specific. There are rules and other thing, bylaws, as you must be knowing. So these were some of my questions.
You see, first we have to remember one principle that I am advocating, which is that the local government must decide on housing issues within its jurisdiction. If the local government opts for a mass housing scheme solution, so be it. If a local government says, no, we need to give employment to our people, so we will use our money to make our own houses, let's say in some rural area. We have to ask ourselves honestly, it's been over 70 years, how is it we go on discussing housing? We have not touched the problem. Otherwise, in an ideal scenario, there's nothing to discuss in housing. Everybody has housing. Why is it that this again and again, these crores are increasing and we are coming out with small solutions? We're talking about 5 crore rural houses. Can we set up a system to deliver these? This is not a question of this system or that system. It is placing the quantum of housing required in each unit of local government. If I take the rural situation, when you tell a panchayat, you have to build 900 houses in your panchayat because that's what you're short of. Here is the money. How do you plan to do it? That is when we are dealing seriously with the problem. Since for the last 20 years, and Kirti Shah, who's been dealing with this, will know it much better, we have had nothing but new solutions to the housing crisis. Every now and then a new solution comes up. Have we touched the scale of the problem? No. So I say every solution is good because it diminishes the problem, however small. I'm not going to criticize whether it is green or not green. Has it reduced human suffering? For one family that doesn't suffer anymore, I think we make a gain.
Arjun?
Yes, sir.
So I think there are a few more questions. Should I, or would you like to take them?
So my connection is really weak, but having this opportunity, one last question I would ask to.
So wait.
Sir.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so please go.
Go
okay,
ahead.
Let me just.
Yes, go ahead.
Sir, as we know, the architects in India is a very wide community, and we have no dearth of solution. And as you suggested that many architects, there are so many architects and there are so many solutions. India really has the problem of scale, as you have also been highlighting. Even the public program housing coming, then now the problem of vacant housing not being utilized, so many things. But why do you think that Indian architects are not able to take this, I would say, crisis head on? To know the quantum of the issue and then work upon it, because everyone has good small solution, I see, and most of us see. How do you see that? How do we break or move towards this inertia to solve this, and also to communicate with government and governments at the local level?
Let me give you an example of how the vaccine has been produced. Now, here is a situation where this country needs millions and millions of doses, and they're coming from one or two suppliers only. But government may be investing in these suppliers to make it happen. Similarly, when you need housing in crores and crores, you don't sit there and make 200 houses and say that this is the typical way to solve the problem. It's no use to anybody. Unless we go to the ground level, right? Like you go to primary health centers are giving vaccination. Panchayats and municipalities are giving housing. You have to deal with the same scale in the same way. We should not get distracted by which technology to use and which not to use, because these are abstract, completely meaningless problems. Our central problem, I will insist, is reduce human suffering caused by the lack of poor housing. Attend to that first. Then let that person, let that family grow, and then move, get another house, expand their house, which is fine. This to me is much more important than any kind of finite solution which is recommending this technology or that technology. You see, housing is not a technical issue. Housing is a social issue. You can't solve it technically.
Right. Sir, one last follow-up thing.
Okay, Ajit, please go ahead.
Sir, in your experiences, since housing is, when we talk about it, there is a lot of gestation period. We know from the experiences of redevelopment project, whenever we are trying to upgrade, and then the 2 years becomes 7 years, how to tackle this issue of gestation, issue of land, and so much of compliance. Even the civil society are very wary of it.
In my books, I would hold this local authority responsible. I'd go to the local authority and say, why have you not achieved your budget? You need help? Can I send 5 engineers to you? Can we send masons to you? What do you need? We have to work with them, all right? We are not in a situation where we are passing and failing people. When we go to local governance in the entire units of local governments in India and panchayats, right, you will find some very strong ones, some very weak ones, some middling ones, like you find in human beings. So you have to work out a system whereby you go and help the weak ones. You attend to where their problems are. You don't bother to help the strong ones who are, maybe they're in the urban areas, maybe they have a lot of experience. Maybe when you go to the deep rural areas, you find the local governance, the panchayat very weak, unable to deal with this problem. You sit there and tackle it. Like you do with the primary health center, you send the doctor there, you take the patient one by one and you treat him. So this is that. I am making the equivalent of providing housing the same as providing health facilities. It is in the same category.
Okay, great. So I think the two last questions, Romi, that we have, and again from Penelope Hill. The first one is, while designing city structures, does planning ignore poor people? Because every city has slums, which is low level of housing structure. Shouldn't city planning, bracket may, it's like could have been incorporated in smart cities, bracket close, take care of these solutions? I mean, which means shouldn't city planning take care of these solutions? If it is possible during planning, can you share a case study of such plans? That's the first. The second one is, what problems, socioeconomic problems, you witnessed while designing SCZ?
To the first question, does planning ignore poor people? I would expand a little bit more. Does the country ignore poor people? The country, we as a country ignore poor people. We talk about them, we pretend to do things for them, but we ignore them. So obviously the planners ignore them. If there is a slum sitting on a valuable piece of real estate, as happens in Bombay very often or in Delhi, the builders are like vultures looking for building opportunities. So yes, the poor are only paid attention to if they can be a source of profit.
Yeah, that makes the point. And the last one, I think, this is it, I think.
Whether there are examples.
What problems?
No, there are. Penelope is asking whether there are examples of housing that have taken place where the poor people have benefited. I would say that there has been a very large spread of ideal housing solutions for the poor, and they have been built extensively across the country in small quantities as examples, as models. And one would have to look at that because we have two or three problems. One is that they get located where there's no employment. So what they tend to do is either sell the house or rent it and then rush back to where the employment is. So none of the housing schemes that I'm aware of are interconnected to health, employment, education, and housing. You cannot, I can assure you that you can take any number of poor people and locate them anywhere, provided you give them employment, health, and education.
Yeah.
After all, that's what brings them to the town. If you give it to them somewhere else, they'll go. But if you throw them off valuable land, which real estate wants, and you locate them on the outskirts of the city without bothering to pay attention to the other three pillars, it's not going to work.
Yeah, great. So I think that's all we have. And we also exhausted our time because we thought we would make it some 40 minutes. But yeah, it was interesting. We almost
Thank you very much.
So thank you so much, Romi. Arjun, you want to add some concluding remarks?
Yes, sir. One or two questions I can bring to. Yes, Romesh. Sir, the new issue which is arising, and sir, as you are highlighting that we need housing as priority and health, and hygiene is becoming very important now in the pandemic time, living in congestion. And sir, as you're mentioning employment, housing and health, the government has launched the ARHC, Affordable Rental Housing Complexes for Migrant Workers. That's a very big highlight last year. This year, like no talk about that. The same thing which happened for the shelter for urban homeless, the scheme under the day annual which we have. Despite that, be it smart city project or our slum one, there is, as Professor Om Mathur highlights, that the problem with our urban sector is of private participation. And as we are knowing that you spoke about builders and others, how do we see the private participation or the zeal of the governments to tackle this issue, because it's also become a very techno-financial matter? How do you see this? Do you see the state government engineers or that system needs a revamp, or because time and again there are consultants coming in, big companies coming in to help or assist there? How do you see in systemic thing it can be improved? What kind of structure we can have to look into this issue, as the gestation, congestion, health, and now also amenities becoming important part. So we have major focus earlier was on sanitation, now water supply, electricity and other things, and integrating so many of things. How do you see the system can be or institutionalized and decentralized going further, sir? And also your concluding thoughts on housing and what we should go ahead. Then I can propose a vote of thanks. Tikender, yes.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think with that.
I think it's very obvious from my perspective that the solution lies through public-private partnership. I have absolutely no doubt about that. When we talk about the solution, I'm not talking about the funding. I'm talking about the delivery and success of a project will depend on a public-private partnership. However, in each region of India, it will take a different form. I cannot go to a panchayat and go to a municipality and have the same model. I have to work with the local people. I have to work with the panchayat members. I have to work with the municipal bodies. I go to a municipal body and say, okay, here is your housing shortage. How should we proceed to solve it? Do you have land? Do you have money? Do you have technical help? Because I am willing to provide it. And it is that ability to be able to diversify your approach, region to region, that you will be able to implement it. Because don't forget that we have been living in a country where nobody has taken responsibility and governance for anything. You see, you can take the constitution and you will find in it a lot of prescriptions about our rights to education, our rights to equality, etc. But you will find a very minor sentence in there that these things you cannot sue the government for. So I cannot ask the government for equality as my right. It is the government which can choose to give it to me or not give it. So there is no responsibility. Now, if you go to Scandinavia, if you go to Denmark or anything where the relationship between the community and government is of a very high order, even in Holland, there you can take your government to court if it is not providing you what they say they should provide. So
interesting, yeah.
we have to accept the fact there is no use giving promises to people when you're not responsible. Why is it that we have not had any progress on the poor? Because there is no responsibility. I as a poor man should be able to go to the Supreme Court and say, where is my house? You have said that you will provide me with a house and health and equality and education. Where is it? Only then this will change.
Perfect. I think so. Thank you so much, Romi, for really bringing in all those important elements of not just housing, but actually defining that housing is not a technical question; it's a social question. And actually, so more to do with the interplay of those social forces. And also that why the local governance and local bodies have to be at the forefront if we have to look at a better future which is better for everyone, not just for few. So I think thanks once again, and it was really a privilege for us to actually start this series, #local governance, with you, Romi. Thank you so much. And,
thank you very much, Tikender. Thank you very much, Dr. Arjun. And thank your colleagues in IMPRI, IMPRI, for facilitating this wonderful exchange. Very valuable for me because not just sitting and letting all this revolve in your head, you know. I love to share it. Tikender has the ability to provoke you.
Thank you so much. And we wish to continue with the series, Arjun. And yeah, yeah, so I think because we have not fixed which date, but yeah, as and when we get our guests, we'll be moving ahead. But definitely it will be on local governance, #local governance. And that also describes the importance of why we have a situation. So over to you, Arjun. I mean, to have the final concluding remarks. Thank you.
Right. So let me quickly propose a vote of thanks. So on behalf of Center for Habitat, Urban and Regional Studies at IMPRI, Impact and Policy Research Institute, we thank all of you, those who have been able to join here on Facebook Live and would be watching later on YouTube and our other podcasts, and also in form of event report and articles. Also, we'll ask Romi sir to give, and we'll also have the PPT so we can learn more. So thank you everyone for joining in this our special talk series, #local governance with Tikender Singh sir. And in today's deliberation, housing in India, what happens next? With our speaker, Romi Khosla sir, highlighting this very important issue. I so much look very much forward to discussing more and learning more with sir, working on housing personally, and also now working on China and other. So thank you so much, sir. And we look forward to learning more from you in the future. And thank you so much for highlighting this very pertinent issue of housing in this circumstance. With that, have a very nice evening and have a good night. Thank you so much, Romi sir. And thank you.
Good.